I want to let my colleagues know that in addition to what Senator King and I are doing with the Arctic Caucus, I'm looking to develop an Arctic infrastructure type bill that, well, it's not the deep water ports. It's some of the basics that I think most folks assume we have in place up in our Arctic waters. First and foremost is better charting, better hydrographic charting. If we're going to see the level of commercial activity that we are seeing, we need to know that we have accurate maps and charts. In addition, things like weather stations and ice forecasting, as Dr. Bitts has mentioned, imperative for us. Weather buoys, electronic buoys, navigational aids that just assist us. So when we look to some of the budget, and I know that this isn't a budget hearing, I will tell you that I become concerned that we're not seeing the budget priorities placed in areas that we could be making a difference. Whether it's NOAA's budget, they've got a reduction in their ocean exploration and research program, which effectively is the area that looks to the mapping and the charting issues. In addition, I'm always worried about our Coast Guard budget, always worried that we ask so much of our Coast Guard men and women and then we don't resource them properly. So we've had a lot of discussion about the need for an icebreaker, $1 billion proposition, but the fact remains that it is more than just an icebreaker. The funding for Arctic operations in the budget is actually down. We need to make sure that we are resourcing appropriately, and Admiral Papp, you mentioned that specifically in your comments. You also mentioned, Admiral, that there is perhaps a misperception out there about the administration's position or support for the Arctic Economic Council in promoting economic development within the Arctic. We clearly heard from Mayor Brower as well as our two members of the Alaska Legislature the imperative for economic opportunity. Can you speak to that misperception and perhaps clarify?
Yes, Madam Chairman. It came across loud and clear when I started listening sessions that there was both confusion and disappointment over the way we approached the Arctic Economic Council. And I would say, as I've had a chance to put this back together and look at it over the last 6 months, we may have approached it differently if I understood the issue, but that was already in motion by the time I came into this job. What I would say is I think each one of the 8 countries have approached it a little bit differently, but the United States in particular is I think, different and comes into an apples and oranges comparison because many of the other countries in the Arctic Council own companies. There are government-owned companies that then are selected by the government and placed in positions on the Arctic Economic Council. As we all know, we have a culture in the United States of staying out of private industry, and granted, there's regulations and other things, but the federal government does not own industries. So we approached it from a different perspective and asked that the Canadians, when they put out their solicitation, to go to the Alaska Chamber of Commerce and ask them for input on the companies to be representing the United States on the Arctic Economic Council. So we did approach it differently. I think the Alaskans should be pleased that they were able to pick their companies to represent us. And as I look across all the companies that are represented or lobbying type firms that have been recommended by the other countries, no one of the countries have approached it exactly the same. It's one of the issues that we intend to take on during our chairmanship to clarify the role of the Arctic Economic Council. It's very high on our priority list in terms of strengthening the Arctic Council. We value the input of industry and these companies, and we will look on how we can improve and move away from this misperception of our lack of support for it.
Well, I thank you for that clarification. As you know, it was an issue that I raised with Secretary Kerry when we met several weeks ago, because I think it is an imperative that we carry forward. There are many things that are presented within the Arctic Council, and based on who is chairing at that time, that initiative either carries forward or it stops. I would suggest to you that this needs to be a priority, that the United States carries forward from what Canada has built, and that when we pass the gavel in 2 years, that will continue. Again, when we talk about the Arctic and recognizing the priorities that have been laid out in the proposal from the United States here, climate is one aspect of what we're dealing with, but an economy that allows for the people of the North to not only exist, but to thrive is critical. So I thank you for that clarification.
Yes, ma'am.